Hello and welcome to Madam Speaker, the podcast taking a deep dive with the female candidates ahead of the next federal election. I'm Charlotte Mortlock, the Executive Director of Hilmer's Network, and I'm very excited to have in the studio today Jamiee Rogers, the Liberal candidate for the seat of Warringah. Jamiee, thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
So I wanted to discuss how you got into the Liberal Party because you only joined in 2022, so you're absolutely not a career politician. So tell me a little bit about kind of, how you got into the party and your interests.
So I've always had an interest in politics, and I think that's why I enjoyed working in the newsroom, because you could keep up to date with what was going on with local politics, but also internationally. So for me in 2022, as you mentioned, that's when I joined the party, and it was because we lost the federal election. And it was such a landslide. My seat at the time, which was North Sydney, fell to an independent. And I was watching that and I thought, wow, I can keep sitting here with an opinion and following politics, or go and do something about it. At the time, I was joining more so just to become a volunteer and just to be a part of the party and meet like-minded people. And that's what I did. I joined the party, it would have been a few weeks after the federal election loss. And it was just so that I could be there to say, all right, for the next election, I'm here to help.
Yeah.
And then it just went from there, and then fast forward time and here I am as a candidate. Exactly.
Well, I think that's so interesting. One of the things that frustrates me the most with politics, I'm obviously quite involved myself, but I think since the invention of social media, it's like people think that they can substitute kind of being involved politically by posting something online. And to me, I find that frustrating because we have the Westminster system. There is a perfect funnel for you to be involved in any party to be able to impact the policies that are created in the country that you live in.
Yeah.
Does that frustrate you?
It is. It does, actually. And especially because now with social media, everyone can have an opinion and formulate an opinion off of a 30-second clip that they might have seen on social. But to actually go and facilitate the change that you might be arcing up about on social,
yes,
the only way to do that is to actually go and be a part of it and join the party. So even now if I'm out door knocking and someone says that they're a Labor supporter, and you just go, that's great. Or they'll say, I'm part of the Labor Party. And you go, that's wonderful, because you're actually part of something that you believe in. And in order to make that happen, you've got to go and be a man on the ground and join the party that you support.
You do. And we've got these massive declining rates of volunteering. And it's like, no, we actually can't just assume that doing a post is the equivalent of doing the work, because it's not.
That's so true. And I think as well, it's also about just trying to create, I think, a group that you want to belong to. So what is it? Why do you want to join the party? Well, you want to join like-minded people. You want to go to events that you can network off and make friends and have a lot of fun while you're doing it. So yes, you're there for a cause, but you're also enjoying it at the same time and making it a group and a community that you want to be a part of. And that's what we're doing, I know, with us in Warringah, is to try and really make it that community feel, that group feel, so that you see us and go, oh, I want to be a part of that too.
Yeah. And, the Liberal Party is such a broad church, but a lot of the time at branch meetings, I enjoy hearing people that disagree with me just as much as those that agree. That it's like, I'm still learning. And even if I'm not won over by their opinion, I'm at least like, oh, that's an opinion that exists. And that's like a valid opinion.
And it's interesting as well, because I find that fascinating when you listen to what one person might view, and it can be completely different to what I'm thinking, but you still give them the time to listen to that opinion, because they might say something that you hadn't heard of previously, still might not agree with it. But I just think it's really interesting listening to what different people have to say and feel.
So, you mentioned newsrooms before. We've both kind of got a bit of a background with newsrooms, but your newsroom looked different to mine because yours was more sporty.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about kind of your career and what you've done.
So I was one of those children that when I was at school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And right up until year 12, and I did my HSC, and we literally went through the UAC guide, my mum and I, and she said, oh, look, this degree says sport in it. Why don't you go and do it? Because you like sport. And I knew I wanted to work in sport, but I didn't know in what area. So this was a sports science degree that also had business in it. So it was called Sport and Exercise Management. That was at UTS. So I went off and did that. It was a lot of fun, made lifelong friends, but you couldn't really do much with that when you finished. So I then went on and did a Masters of Marketing, and that was also at UTS. So my journey into the media space was not as direct and clear cut. I didn't go and study journalism. I learnt it all on the job. So my first job out of uni actually was in marketing.
Right.
And I was at the Australian Jockey Club, and it was a fantastic place to work. But then I moved across over to Sky Racing, and that was where I was there in marketing to start off with. And I had a boss at the time that said, we're trying to sort of change the way that people look at us and our business. And I just really think that you would be fantastic if you started working on air. And she's like, so you're starting on the radio next week. And literally that's how it happened. And I sat there, I was like, oh. And for your listeners and for yourself, I actually was someone who really struggled with, it's not that I wasn't confident, but I struggled with speaking to people I didn't know.
Yeah.
Public speaking, even though I did debating and drama and all that stuff at school, to be able to stand up and to do something on air like radio or television, that just freaked me out because also I had no idea what I was doing. So everything was heavily scripted, pre-recorded, and bit by bit, I just learnt from there. After I did some training at NIDA, my boss said, oh, actually, you should be on television, not just radio. So let's do TV. And that's sort of how those market updates were formulated. But when I then was doing the Sky Racing component, Jim Wilson at Channel 7, I met him very early on because he gave me presenter training and voice training about, that's 15 years ago now.
Wow.
So he was, and then still to this day, he always checks in, see how I'm going, gives me advice. Yeah, like I'll call him all the time. Yeah, he's been a fantastic mentor for me. And after I'd been working at Sky for quite a long time, Sky Racing, he actually said to me, you need to come and work in a proper newsroom. Not saying that Sky Racing isn't, but it's just very different. Yep. And so I would do my shifts. So I had a very supportive boss who was also quite close to Jim Wilson. And he said, yeah, when you finish your shifts at Sky, I would then drive to Channel 7 and I would work and do the sports shifts with Michelle Bishop and Mel McLaughlin and Jim Wilson. And I did that for about 18 months. And it was great because that's when you really learned the hone in on your journalism skills. And I ended up then moving on to the Sky Sports radio team with the Big Sports Breakfast with Laurie Daly and Michael Clark and Jared Middleton.
Yeah.
And I would read the news on there and write it and edit it and then also just host the show when Jared was away. But then during that time, I'd finish my shift on Big Sports Breakfast. So I'd start at 4 a.m., finish at 9, and then I would drive to Channel 10 and work at Channel 10 from 10 a.m. until the news. Because it was the way to keep learning.
Totally.
I love learning, and you have to kind of be there and take the opportunities when they arise, even though you might be killing yourself in the process.
Yeah, it's it sounds funny to be going across different networks.
Yeah. And I must say that's one good thing about when you're working at Sky Racing or Sky Sports Radio, because it's not a competitor to really anyone.
Yeah, I was thinking, do they have non-compete clauses?
No. Well, so I couldn't like pop up on like a racing.com or something like that. But in terms of the Channel 10s and Channel 7s, it was, off you go. As long as it doesn't clash with any of your current work, go for it. And that's how I ended up doing a lot of things. I did like randomly the lawn bowls on Fox Sports and I've done the surfing on Channel 7 because nothing ever clashed.
Yeah.
So you just have this wealth of random stuff.
Yeah.
Some MC work with, Cricket Australia and did some stuff with the Roosters and all different things while still having your main job. And then I'd just be going off doing all other things. So it was great in that aspect that you could just go and explore all different sports and it was great.
And so you just mentioned there are a few of the sports you've reported on, and one of the questions that I was going to ask later is actually what's your favourite sport to watch and what's your favourite sport to play?
So my favourite sport to watch would be basketball. So it's NBA, NBL. Yeah, it's such a great
So it's fast.
Yes, fast. It's just entertaining, whether you're watching on TV, watching it live. I love it. Same with footy though, like AFL and NRL. I love that space too. And
can't do NRL as much, but I do like AFL. I like watching. I find watching AFL. This is a weird thing to say, but I find watching AFL similar to watching netball.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, so I don't know. I can just follow it better because I played a lot of netball.
Yeah,
and it's like the rhythm of it seems more similar than NRL.
That's a very, very valid point. And it's I've never thought of that, but yes, I can see where you're coming from. And in terms of participating, I still also really like swimming because I think swimming's great to watch. And also participating in swimming. Yeah. Water polo is one that I always really like to play. I don't watch it as much because it's not really broadcast as often as what we would see a lot of these other sports. But yeah, I love just pretty much watching anything really.
And were those the sports you played like in school, like swimming and water polo? And
Yes,
stuff?
and netball. So swimming was basically my entire life.
Yeah.
And because of that, water polo fell quite
Yeah.
naturally within that.
Yeah.
Netball was something that I would do because I enjoyed it and it was a way to sort of escape from swimming 9 times a week.
What position?
I actually was goal defense or goalkeeper.
Great.
I wouldn't
I
say
was
I
a
was any
GD too.
good. Yeah, so I wasn't any good, but I enjoyed it. And it was just nice to break away from swimming.
Yes. And you actually were quite a good swimmer.
Yeah, so I mean, I never reached the pinnacle of the Olympics, but I got to the Olympic trials in 2000.
Amazing.
And I swam with a broken foot.
Oh, did you?
So this was, I was in year 9.
Devastating. In year 9?
Yeah, so I was in year 9. And
When you went to the Olympic trials?
Yep.
That's very impressive.
Yeah, so I was 15. And I actually remember, so it was one of those stories where I was never allowed to go on school camp. I went once in year 7 and I wasn't able to go again because in case you get injured.
Yes.
And what happened was I missed school camp and my brother, he went to Knox and I went to watch one of their rugby games and he said, oh, come and have a look at this area. And it was like the year 12 area, which was super scary for the little year 7 and 8 kids.
Yeah.
So he took me down and I tripped on a gutter. No joke, it would have been maybe like 2 centimeters high. But the way that I tripped, I broke a bone in the side of my foot. And that meant that, one, I couldn't go to nationals that year.
Oh, no.
But with the Olympic trials, I remember thinking, there's no way I'm missing that. So I sort of like hobbled out to the starting blocks and swam with a broken foot.
Were you like, should have gone on school camp?
Yeah. My mum was like, oh my gosh, you should have just stayed at camp.
Yeah. Because we actually went to the same school.
We did.
A few years apart.
Yeah.
And year 9 camp was like a big deal. You know, when you were in year 7, you were like, because year 9 camp was the one that was supposed to be like a week long, very rigorous, very intensive.
Yeah.
So I can see why you decided not to go.
Yeah.
But
it was too close to nationals. There's the sacrifices you have to make.
Yeah. And so tell me a little bit more about kind of what your childhood looked like, where you grew up and, you know, obviously playing lots of sports with a brother.
Yeah. So I've actually got 3 brothers.
Oh,
yeah. So I have an older brother called Tim and then I've got 2 younger ones, Jason and Scott. And Scott's like he's 6 years younger than me. So he's always been like my little baby. We still call him like little baby Scott, even though he's 6'2" and married with 2 children himself. But we grew up, you know, in a pleasant-ish sort of lifestyle. Like we lived on the North Shore, so grew up Warringah way.
Yep.
I went to school at Ravenswood and then Barker, so I had a fantastic upbringing in that sense. That we were really lucky that we got to go to those schools. My parents did end up getting divorced though, which is I think what sort of made me start to think of life a little bit differently because you know we had a really good life until they got divorced, and we sort of ended up with nothing really because my mum hadn't worked for 20 years. And you see firsthand how important it is for me. Like everyone has their own beliefs in life, but for me, when you watch what happens when you've given up a career to look after the children, and then you end up the marriage falls apart, and my dad moved overseas. And I, at the time, so we were a bit older, so I was 18, so I was able to help pay for my other 2 brothers, and my older brother was also around. But you struggle. So you start to see
it's a lot of responsibility at a young age.
Yeah. So I was helping my mum because she was great. So she went and got a job as a receptionist at Warringah Podiatry. So we've always got a very soft spot for that business. And she worked there for a long time, then became a property manager and was working in real estate. So she ended up doing really well. But you just see what happens when all things just start to fall apart.
Yeah. And I think, you know, I'm semi-recently married. I've been married for 2 years. And, you know, I'm pregnant, and you can see you know, when you start to have kids and childcare is expensive, you can see the temptation of tapping out of the workforce.
Yeah.
And I want to tap out of the workforce for a while to raise my kid. And if we have more kids, I would like to do that if I have the luxury of doing that. But it is hard. You know, a lot of marriages end in divorce, and no one ever gets married with the intention to divorce later.
Yeah.
But women over the age of 55 are the fastest group of homelessness.
Yeah.
And that is obviously why. Like a lot of women kind of completely not their fault, making decisions for their family, putting their family first. And then, I think that's one of the really interesting spaces that we have to, as a society, make sure that those women aren't left behind.
Yeah, absolutely 100%. And watching it firsthand, you come into it with a different perspective. And I think that's why I rushed back to work when I had kids, because I didn't want to be out of it for too long. On the flip side, my husband, his parents have been married for, I think it's like 48 years or something. They're still madly in love, and it's great to see. But when you come from the side where you see what happens, I've always just found it really, really important to maintain having a job, so that if we did get divorced, I could still fund my children and continue to provide a roof over their head and
not have to start from scratch with a
exactly.
career.
And I think that that's one of the things that really drives me a lot. And my mum often will refer to that, is that you see what happens. And it was probably a really good thing for me to go from having this,
idyllic lifestyle.
And then you see, another side of life.
And so was that a really challenging kind of couple of years there while everything kind of recalibrated?
Yeah, especially when, we had to move houses and, with Scott, like I paid for him when he went on schoolies and things like that, because my mum just couldn't do it. But at the same time, we were all still together, and you're healthy, and you also really appreciate that as well, because later on my mum actually did almost lose her life with cancer. So you do then put things into perspective that, we lost pretty much everything that we'd had, but at the same time, we've all still got each other, and at the end of the day, that's the most important thing.
And you also have a really big interest in mental health. Was that something that kind of came up around that time as well?
So it actually has come up pretty much my entire life. And just so all your listeners know, my mum is very aware that I talk about the situation, because I did say to her that it was a really big part of why I started going into the Gotcha for Life Foundation. And so my mum has very severe depression. And so you watch when you're growing up what happens if someone's not getting the right treatment or having the right support around them to be able to help them. And for me, when I then had two sons, when I joined and started working with Gotcha for Life, Archer was a tiny baby. So I then had two sons, and I remember saying to Gus Warland, who's the founder of Gotcha for Life and on Triple M, and has also been someone that has been instrumental for me in my career. And I remember saying to him, like, I've got these two boys, and you hear these statistics about how, you lose 7 men a day to suicide. What can I do to learn some tools? Because I've seen it with my mom, and I want to ensure that I can help my sons to make sure that they're not a statistic, but also help other people around me that might be struggling, and just learning the tools on how best to navigate anyone that is struggling with mental health.
Yeah. And so I guess, if you are lucky enough to be voted in Parliament, one of those areas that will be a key focus of yours will be mental health.
Yeah, it certainly will. And one thing that we already know for sure is that Peter Dutton has already said with the Better Access Scheme, under this current Labor government, they scrapped what was 20 subsidised psychology sessions with Medicare. They slashed down to 10, and Peter Dutton's going to return that to 20.
Yeah.
So I think that's a fantastic starting point, just because it's so important to be able to have that care and to pay for it.
Yeah.
The amount of people that I've spoken to, when they talk about how expensive it is to go and see a psychologist, being able to have that help, because you don't want that to be a barrier for you not to be able to go and get the help that you need. But then also just ensuring that there's adequate funding for mental health beds within hospitals, and ensuring that a lot of these charities that are doing fantastic work, that they also have the funds to ensure that they can keep doing what they're doing.
So tell me a little bit about Gotcha for Life.
So Gotcha for Life was founded in 2017. And this actually was off the back of Gus losing his best friend to suicide. And at the time, and he was saying his friend was one of those people that was quite jovial and, was always sort of the life of the party. And then it came as a real shock when he lost his friend. And that's why Gus started saying, with men in particular, they hold all their feelings inside. So Gotcha for Life is about changing the way that we speak about feelings, in particular for men and boys, where, it was always that boys don't cry, man up, toughen up. So it's to stop saying that and saying to them, it's okay to cry, or it's okay to not be okay.
To have big emotions.
Exactly. And so that's what Gotcha for Life is about. It's about building mental fitness. Just as you would go see a doctor if you were sick, or a physio if you'd hurt your back, or And the same as when you're not feeling mentally well,
Yeah.
it's about taking the steps to go and ensure that you can work on that as well.
Yeah.
And that's what they do. So they're out in the community, schools, surf clubs, wherever it might be, doing mental fitness workshops. And they've also now got the mental fitness gym, so you can have access to that on your phone, and that's
cool.
free. So that's, again, tools on how to strengthen your mental fitness. So they're doing great things, and just trying. Their mission is to bring down the suicide number as close to zero as possible.
So you've mentioned there a few times about kind of the focus on men's mental health. And I think this is such an interesting area for women and for, very overt feminists like myself, because I do think some of the rhetoric over the past few years has been really nasty and cruel and demonizing of men and young boys. Yeah. And I am not saying that we need to make excuses for them. But I do think that there is a responsibility to also not make the situation worse.
Yeah. And you're right. There is a point where you don't want to be demonizing. And as I said earlier, I'm a mum of 2 young boys. So I need to ensure that they're going into a society that will welcome them and not make them feel bad for who they are.
Yeah.
And ensuring that they then also have the tools to make sure that they can navigate that if that is the situation that happens with them. But I think it's also teaching right from a young age, young girls and boys, about whether it is about equality and just talking about it in just a natural, normal way versus it being aggressive or putting men...
guilt or...
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
And that is one of the things that, all psychologists will say, that shame is one of the least productive feelings that anyone can feel. Like, it doesn't lead to anything positive. So I don't think it helps the women's cause to be shaming men. And I am not making excuses. Women need to power forward and continue pushing for equality. And I don't think the onus is on women as well to fix the men's mental health crisis that we are having. Yeah. But I also do think it's our responsibility to not make it worse and to not add fuel to the fire.
Don't add fuel to the fire. But also, you can tell when people are struggling. Not always, but, you might be in your workplace. You might see that someone is being left out of a situation, and it could be not just necessarily because it's male, but someone might be being left out of a situation, and you could also go up to that person and make sure that they're okay and just ask them, is everything okay with you? And sometimes it's just that conversation starter to know that they're in a space that it's okay for them to tell you that, that was a really tough meeting, or that made me feel really crap, or whatever that might be. But it's just opening and allowing people to feel comfortable to say, let's talk this through.
Yeah, and just because they're like a white male doesn't mean you can't also have compassion for them.
Exactly. You need to have compassion for them because they could also be really hurting inside. Yeah. And that's what with Gotcha is one thing is like they would then be holding that in and try and act all stoic and that things are fine and just keep pushing it down. And that's what we do not want to see.
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting conversation. And I think in parts of America, the life expectancy is going down for American men because of mental health like suicide, opioid crisis and alcoholism. And it's like, that's not good enough. Like,
no,
and it's not my key focus. My focus will always be on women's issues. But simultaneously, I do think it's very important that conversation is nuanced.
And it is. So in Australia, suicide's the number 1 cause of death in 15 to 49-year-olds. So every single day we lose 7 men and 2 women. So that's 9 people every single day that wakes up one morning and not the next.
Yeah.
And I just think that those are heartbreaking statistics.
Yeah.
And that's something that we certainly need to be addressing as a society.
So 2017, you start working for Gotcha for Life or being an ambassador. And around the same time when did you swim the English Channel?
So Gotcha was established in 2017. I started doing things with them in 2020.
Okay.
So I swam the channel in 2022,
right?
But it was a 2-year training process. So I actually remember the conversation so vividly with Gus Wallen when I rang him to say, this is what I'm going to do.
How did you get there?
Okay.
Like, how did you
Yeah,
just
that's a
spring
very
into
good question. We'll
Yeah.
rewind a little bit. So working on the Big Sports Breakfast, I was obsessed with this girl called Chloe McArdle.
Mm-hmm.
She's a marathon swimmer. She's Australian. And at the time, she was trying to break the men's record for the amount of crossings, which was 34.
Amount of crossings of
over
the
years. So
of the English Channel.
Yeah, amount of crossings of the English Channel. So she was doing that. I was updating all of our listeners, and it was great. She ended up going on to now hold the world record, and that's 44. So she beat this English woman who's held it forever, and Chloe now is the channel queen. And anyway, and I was updating all of our listeners, and Laurie Daly said at one point, he's like, oh, you should go and do it. And we're all like, ha, ha, ha. And then I got home. My husband was like, you are so obsessed with this Chloe girl. You love to swim. Why don't you just go and give it a try? And I actually remember saying to him, like, no, I couldn't think of anything worse because I've watched all of Chloe's videos. I've watched what she looks like at the end, and she is a trained marathon swimmer, and it just looked horrendous. But then once an idea gets planted into my head, that's when you start investigating it a little bit more, and I looked into it, and the next thing I found, I'd booked my slot, and it took 2 years to get a spot. So I booked it, and I remember actually saying to one of my friends, oh, my God, what have I just done? Like, I'm not an ocean swimmer. I'm a swimmer, but I was a breaststroker in a pool. That's significantly different to an ocean swimmer for long periods of time.
Can I ask, okay, so just not to get, stuck in the weeds here, but when you book a spot to swim the English Channel, is it a commercialized thing? Like, is there a website that you go to and you're like, I want to swim the English Channel, and then you pay a deposit?
Yeah, literally, you go to Google. How do I swim across the English Channel? So you go through the English Channel Association. They have 5 registered pilots.
And do they do all of the logistics of on the day this is your team?
No. So
you just pay the price to swim in the ocean.
You go through, there's 5 different pilots that you could go through with this organisation, and you literally just email all of them just to say, hey, when's your next available spot? And they all kept coming back in like 2022. And I was thinking, God, that's really far away. Anyway, I got my spot with the boat was called, he's called Peter the Crab, and the boat was Rowena, and he was so lovely, and he actually retired after my season of, and passed it down to his son, also called Peter. And
couldn't do better than you.
Yeah,
he was like, well, and I'm done.
Yeah, it's like, that's it. We'll go off on a 5. She made it across. So I booked it in with him, and that means he's the pilot, and then he has 2 other people that are on the boat with him, but I have to bring my own support network.
Right.
So 2 of my friends came. Both of these 2 friends straight away when I said I was doing it were like, oh my God, we're going to be there. We'll be your support. Sarah, who is like one of life's most incredible people, she was there on all my training swims. So she came out on a kayak, and she was there practicing on how to throw all the food out that's attached to a rope because you can't touch anything. And then my other friend Corrie was also there. So Corrie's someone that's gone and done those 6-star marathons. So they're both quite impressive in themselves.
I have never thought about eating. I have never thought, because how long does it take?
So it took me 12 and a half hours.
And how many Ks is it?
So it's 35 in a straight line, but it's closer to 50 just because of the tide pulling you all around.
And so what?
Yeah.
I have to,
no,
actually
people
blowing my
always
mind.
People always find it's the detail.
So how do they throw you food on a rope?
On a rope. So it's a water bottle or a little container that's attached to a rope, and then they throw it out. I quickly grab it, drink it, and then continue on. So you
and
stop.
So do you like roll on your back and like?
No, you tread water. That's when your water polo skills come in because you're treading water.
Your egg feeder.
Yes, doing the egg feeder kick. They'll throw out the water, and it would be things like gel that's been put into water so I can quickly squirt it versus trying to slide it out because it's so cold, the water, that your hands are like you're quite shaky at the start. But then things like gels, muesli bars that would be chopped up into small pieces, lots of lollies, especially towards the end, which I hadn't really trained with lollies, but I more bought the lollies for my friends so that they had things to eat while we were out there. But it got really tough towards the end, and so all I wanted was chocolate and lollies, which was super random because I'd never had that. That's all I wanted to eat just to get me through to the end. But after 12 and a half hours, so the last 3 hours, my shoulder had just given up. It had had enough. It was every single stroke was like a knife was stabbing into the front here, and it was the most horrific pain. But in my head, it was just, if I need to have shoulder surgery, I know a shoulder surgeon. I've got a great physio. Just keep going to the end. Just keep going to the end. And then the last hour my pilot leans over and said, "Oh, I hate saying this to swimmers, but the tide's changing and we're getting pushed back to the UK. And this is a big risk with the channel, is that the tide changes quite dramatically and a lot of swimmers get pulled out because it just becomes too strong and you can't go forward." And he said, "You have to put your head down now and sprint to the end." And so it's really funny whenever you look at my videos, you're like, wow, that's her sprinting, because I'm like limping. Like in my head, I thought that I was going so fast because my arm was killing and I just sort of limping to the end. And then also at the end, most people finish on the beach.
Yeah.
But I was in this like remote part of France where I had to climb out over rocks, my hands up and then straight back out.
My goodness. What a wild, wild ride.
Yeah, it was fantastic. And the 2 years worth of training you actually ended up needing. So when I thought that 2 years felt really far away, it actually was the perfect amount of time to be able to train.
So what do you do when you get out? Like when you're out and you're like climbing over whatever.
Yeah,
sounds like Gallipoli. Yeah. I'm like picturing you landing on Gallipoli.
Oh yeah, it was. Mine was actually quite anticlimactic because normally you're allowed to sort of take some time out along the beach and walk along, and there's often a lot of locals are cheering swimmers on when they're coming in.
Fun.
But with me, I was in such a remote part that I quickly climbed out of the rocks. You have to put your hands up when you clear water. And it was straight back onto the boat. And then it's a 2.5 hour boat ride back. But because your body, when you've been swimming for a long period of time and you're lying flat for that long, when you stand up, you actually can't handle it. So I had to then lie back down. So I then was lying like on my back like this for the rest of the whole 2.5 hour boat ride back.
That night, was it the best feeling ever?
No,
when you got to land?
No, because
I was like, and now for the happy ending.
And whenever I tell this story, people are like, God, you're really not making this sound very good. So when you're in the ocean for long periods of time, you lose layers of your tongue. So you've got massive blisters all over your tongue and inside your mouth. So you can't really talk, and it actually is quite painful. And I had no voice because the salt had doesn't damage your vocal cords permanently, but when you come out, you just can't really say much. And because my shoulder was so sore, I literally was just this like lumped over. Sarah ran me a bath. Also because I'm covered in channel grease, so I'm using this credit card to like scrape the channel grease off.
Fat they put on you so you don't get
sunscreen.
cold.
No, mine was more so I don't get burnt.
Okay.
We do a lot of ice training, like ice baths and water training in preparation for that. For the cold, so you don't get hypothermia. So I just sat there like in the bath, just trying to scrape off this white thick sunscreen. For any of your listeners that have children that use pseudo cream, it's a bit like that, where it's that really thick white cream. But my whole body was just aching and I couldn't talk. The next day we went and had a champagne, but that stings the tongue. So, it was, but at the same time, it was such a great feeling to get across because only 1 in 5 people make it. It's classified as the Mount Everest of swimming.
Yes. So, and you have told me a stat one time, like more people attempt and fail the English Channel than Mount Everest or something like that?
Yeah, so more people have climbed Mount Everest than swam across the English Channel.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah. So it's an awesome
How many people have done it?
to be into it. Oh, I think successful swimmers is around 1,500 or 1,200 or something like that.
And you're one of those.
Yeah. So it's an awesome feeling. It only really sunk in what I did after I left. No, so
I would be like,
yes. So my friends that I was with were like, come on, you got to go get a tattoo. You have to mark this occasion.
Yeah.
But I couldn't figure out, like, what do I do? What do I get?
Yeah.
So I'm sure I'll still get it at one point. I just couldn't figure out what do I do? And so I was like, oh, just a really thin wave or something. Yeah. But it was a really cool experience, the entire thing. And it didn't really sink in until I was back.
Yeah.
And I was talking to people, and more so actually once I left that swimming community, because I haven't left it, but I wasn't training because I was with a group called Vlad Swim, and that's where I was doing all my training. And all of those Vlad swimmers are there either training for the Channel, training for Catalina, training for, one guy was training to do 2 laps of the English Channel. So I got the boat back. He was going to swim back.
Oh, God.
So for me, I was like, God, I'm so lazy. I'm getting the boat back. You're training for 2 laps. So I was around these people all the time that were doing these amazing things in the ocean. So
then
it just
you feel
was so
bad
normal.
if you're complaining as well.
Well, yeah. So it just was such a normal thing to do. And then now that I'm not swimming long distances. I do Bold and Beautiful at Manly, which is about 1,500 meters. But it's only when you look back on it, you think, gosh, I swam for 12 and a half hours.
Yes.
And yeah, I'm like, oh, that's really cool. But yeah, and I raised $75,000 for Got You for Life. So it was also, that was a huge part of it as well. And
it's a huge amount of money for it.
Yeah, well, everyone got behind it. It
How
was
good.
really, really nice. Everyone got behind it.
So from swimming the English Channel to then swimming for your campaign launch.
Yes.
So then when you were endorsed as the candidate for Warringah, you then swam from
Manly to Blues Point Reserve.
Okay. Now, and it was an amazing swim as well. How long's that swim?
So it took me 6 hours.
And it wasn't supposed to take 6
No.
hours, was it?
We had sort of thought around the 4-hour mark, which is why. So I actually hadn't trained at all for that.
Yeah.
But in my head, I was like, oh yeah, 4 hours. You can do that. You know,
Yeah.
come on, you'll be fine. Lucky I didn't know it was going to be 6 hours. I think that would have been tougher mentally. But also because I wasn't really prepared for it, I was stuck in a tide for an hour where I didn't move, and that was, funny enough, out the front of Kirribilli House. And I was
waving
stuck
to
there.
out
Yeah,
there.
pretty much. I was like, oh, just say hello, just quickly duck up here and have a break. But we had a bull shark as well.
Yes.
And that was the closest I've ever come to a shark in all of my training. Like, we used to swim out the back of Coogee to Bondi and back, and so you're always out in open water. But I've never actually. You'd see grey nurse sharks because the grey nurse nursery is out behind Clovelly.
Yeah.
So you'd see them down there, but they're such timid sharks that you don't really think twice about it. But in this instance, I was swimming along, and my kayakers on the right, I could see them all pointing over there. And I stopped and I said, "What are you doing?" And they're like, "Nothing, just keep swimming."
Oh my God.
And so I put my head down and kept swimming. And then when I took a breath to my left, and the support crew were all standing over there, like pointing and looking, and then like pointing to. And again, I stopped and I said, "You have to tell me what's going on."
Yeah.
And they said, "Look, there is a shark, but don't worry, it's just looking for food, not you."
Yeah.
And they said, "Just come in really tight to the boat." And I said, "So should I get out?" And they're like, "No,
Yeah.
just keep swimming."
Yeah.
I thought, oh my gosh. And there's like this video where I've just got my hand over my mouth. I'm thinking, oh my God, there's a bull shark. Because they said after there was a bull shark. But it was about 10 meters away.
Insane.
We did have shark shields though. So
Yeah.
I now will say that obviously that technology works.
Yes.
It's been proven. Like, you know
Yes.
that it's fantastic technology. I also had a shark bands on my ankle.
What's a shark band?
So the shark bands are this incredible. A lot of surfers wear them on their
Like a repellent.
wrists and ankles, and it's
Cool.
a repellent. So the shark will come in, but then they get like a zap on their nose and just quickly swim off.
Yeah.
And so I think because the bull shark got pretty close, but didn't get close enough to actually
Have a
hurt
nibble.
me. Yeah, exactly. Funnily
Well,
enough,
there you
my
go.
kids actually said before I went in the water, because my two little ones, they're 7 and 5, and they both were like, "Look, it's okay. You know, if you just lose a limb or something, you'll be fine, but just don't get eaten." I'm like, oh my God.
Wow,
Okay,
how
thanks.
uplifting. Thanks,
Yeah.
guys.
And so when we saw the shark, everyone's like, "Oh, we better not tell back at land in case the kid's here." So yeah, all these
That
things.
is so funny. So obviously then, that's your campaign launch, and now you've been on the ground in Warringah.
Yeah.
What's the campaign been like? What are you hearing from all of the people that you're speaking to?
The campaign has been, I think, fantastic. We've got a huge group of volunteers that are all really energetic, enthusiastic, and really excited about the potential of bringing this sea back to blue. The feedback on the ground, again, has been people really wanting change, and they're struggling all within their own way. When we're door knocking or speaking at a train station or a bus stop, they'll talk about what's going on in their life, and they see Peter Dutton and the Liberal Party as the light at the end of the tunnel, because, as they say, they don't feel that Albo and the Labor government have any solutions on how to fix what's going on, and in fact, it's just continuing to get worse.
In a cost of living crisis.
Yes, in a cost of living crisis. But then also things, there's cost of living and there's housing, and then locally with our issues of things like, now I know this is not a federal issue, but it's a big issue within our electorate, are things like the council rate rises.
Yeah.
Because as people have said,
you guys got
it's just another one.
smashed.
Yeah, across two parts of the electorate. So Mossman were the only ones that weren't hit. So the Northern Beaches went up by 40% and North Sydney went up by 87%.
God.
So IPART are still looking into those rate rises. There hasn't had a resolution yet. But people were just really annoyed and upset and just feel like it's just something else to add to what's already a really big struggle. And when you hear stories about children, the parents are having to decide whether to, we can't really afford to send you to sport this term. And, obviously I come from a sports background, but I just think sport's so important for
It is.
children. And, you learn resilience, you learn how to win and lose, you know how to get along with people and to play with friends. And I'm not saying that you play sport to go and win. It's you go there for the social aspect.
I think 94% of women in C-suite in Australia played sport.
Yeah, that was on one of your podcasts.
Yeah.
I think you had a guest. I can't remember who it was, but they said that. Yes. Yeah. And it's true because it's a really great foundation to set you off onto a successful life. And I just think it's just really sad that people have to make that decision that we can't afford to send you to play sport this term.
Yeah.
Or especially if there's multiple children within a household or buying new school shoes.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe you can just keep using the ones that you had last year and then we'll reassess. So it's just things like
really
that it's having to decide, I was speaking to a newsagent recently who said his rent is $300,000 a year and his energy is $100,000 a year and he turns the aircon off. They can't have the air conditioning running in their venue. But that's the same as households. They say the same. You've got to make a decision. Do we run our heating or aircon or do we go and pay our bills for food?
Yeah.
So it's just really tough,
really
tough out there right now. And people are seeing Peter Dutton as the light at the end of the tunnel.
We're going to do a change of pace.
Oh,
we're going to do rapid fire questions now.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got a couple of them.
Mm-hmm.
You said before that your first job out of uni was in marketing.
Yeah.
What was your first ever job?
My first ever job was actually as a swimming coach.
Oh,
yes,
good one.
I was just really quickly because I know this is rapid fire. But I was just, you can be like 15, 9 months to go get a job, whatever that age was. Yeah. And I was at Knox and my mum goes, off you go talk to Chuck, who was the head of swimming at that time. And she said, go tell Chuck you'll work for free. Off you go. And so I walked up to Chuck and said, oh, Chuck, can I have a job here? My mum said I'll work for free. And he said, you're not going to be working for free, but we actually do need some swimming coaches. Yeah. Great. So I ended up working there. Now I was there for about 7 years.
Yeah.
And I coached the 3-year-olds at the babies.
Oh, sweet.
Which is, it was great.
Yeah, I got a job at 14 and 9 months as well. My mum was the same, but I worked at a dry cleaner.
Oh, did you? That's a good job.
She sent me off. She was like, okay, you're of age.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a bad on-air blooper?
So the one that comes to mind the quickest, it wasn't huge, but at the time I just couldn't believe I did it. So I was sitting there, it was live TV. I was talking about sport. We were on Sky and I don't know what I was doing, but this producer came into my ear and said, oh, you need to move your water bottle out of shot. And he said it while I was talking. And so then I just thought that we'd go on to an ad break or something because then all of a sudden I go mid-sentence, I'm sorry, what was that? Down the barrel of the TV. And then he comes and goes like, no, keep talking. And I said, sorry? And that was literally live TV. Where you sit
That's really
there
breaking
thinking,
the fourth wall.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. So that's what happened with me.
I once said the C word on air. Never that I use it, but I was saying cold front so many times in a row, and that went through.
I think that is a blooper.
Yeah, it was just my little eyes popped out of my head, and that was live as well. Where is your happy space or your happy place, I should say?
So my happy place would be literally just like cuddling my children.
Yeah,
just
beautiful.
Lying in bed and cuddling them because we don't have a lot of time where you just lie down and cuddle.
So nice.
So that's really lovely. Or being out in the ocean.
Yeah. Good one. What does your ideal Sunday look like?
So at the moment, we have nippers. So Sunday morning for us is nippers at Freshwater.
Oh, that's
it's
good.
Just the best way to start the day. I'm a volunteer with nippers because Hudson's in the under 7s and he's the sort of child that it's in his best interest if I'm there volunteering. And so I'll get my bronze medallion and keep working up with him so that I can keep being a volunteer with that Surf Lifesaving Club. And it's great. Beautiful way to start the day.
Yeah.
And then we tend to see family or friends or something in the afternoon. But it's always a lot of family time.
That's beautiful. What is your favourite cafe or restaurant?
Ellie Mae's is 100% our favourite cafe.
Where's that?
So she's in Camaray and she is like the absolute mecca, the rock of our community. And she was so important during COVID. And it's actually how my husband's met a lot of his friends through there. And you could go up there because you might be having a quiet day, or I don't know, something might be going on. You just walk up there and you know that you're going to see smiling faces, and
Beautiful.
it's like a family, to the point where she actually had to close when she had her baby shower because all of her customers were there.
Oh, that's so fun.
Yeah, so we're literally there.
It's a beautiful
every day.
sense of community.
Very much so.
What is something that is still on your bucket list and it
Mhm.
can't be getting into Parliament? I'm just going to take that one out. 'cause
Yeah,
I'm
no,
assuming
take
that's in
that one
there.
out. Yes. Mine would be, I think I've always just wanted to go to Egypt.
Oh, cool.
I love ancient Egyptian history. I just
Yep.
love it so much. So on my bucket list would be to travel
Good one.
to Egypt.
Go to the Nile, see the pyramids.
Yes.
A book or movie recommendation, and it doesn't have to be highbrow.
So mine, I actually would recommend some series at the moment.
Right.
So Apple Cider Vinegar
Love
on Netflix. I think that is just such a great show. But then also at the same time, the true documentary of that Belle Gibson story has also just come out. So Apple Cider Vinegar is about Belle Gibson and her brain cancer fraud.
yeah.
So, and then there's the true documentary about it as well, both on Netflix.
Says a lot as well about like how, like, I don't know, society and social media and how those things kind of, and even just the wellness space. It was actually really fascinating. I thought it was awesome.
It was also just to get away with it for that long, to be able to con people. And I remember when it all happened at the time, but then to watch it back, you're like, oh, that's right.
That was wild.
Yes. So I would recommend that.
So obviously with Hilma's Network and our support of women in politics, we like to finish with asking, who is a woman that inspires you?
So I've been really lucky throughout my life in terms of people that I have looked up to. So I'll just give you a few, because I've got, when I was young swimming, Hayley Lewis. I just loved her, even though it was a different stroke, but I just wanted to be her, and would always copy things that I saw her doing, especially if she was promoting a food or something. I'd be getting my mum to go and buy it. And then my middle part of my life has certainly been, I've been surrounded by the most amazing friends who are just so successful and make me want to be a better person as well. Like I mentioned Sarah before, and, she ran 250 Ks across New Zealand, and, it's just looking to these incredible women for inspiration.
You need some motivation.
So really lucky.
Feel bad.
But that's it. You see these things, you're like, wow, okay, well, I'll go
Inspire
and do something like that with them. And then I think in the political space, I just have always really liked Julie Bishop.
Yeah.
I just find her, I remember watching her when she was in government and just thought she was such a well-spoken, articulate, while also incredibly strong woman.
Very strong.
And I really liked that.
Yeah. Well, Jamiee, thank you so much for coming on, Madam Speaker. We wish you all the best of luck in the campaign.
Thank you for having me.
Authorised by C. Mortlock, Hilma's Network Foundation Limited, Sydney.